Hey there, welcome to Sleepy History Secrets, the channel where history gets uncomfortably hot, but the voice stays calm. Tonight, we're travelling back to the sun-baked world of ancient Greece, a civilization famous for democracy, philosophy, and statues that clearly had a strong opinion about pants. But behind the marble myths and heroic poetry lies a much harder truth, one that smells faintly of goat, olive oil, and human endurance. You're about to find out what life was really like for the average person who didn't have a temple or a tragedy named after them. Before we begin, take a quiet moment to like the video or subscribe, only if you truly enjoy falling asleep to the sound of humanity's bad decisions. And when you're ready, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know how many of us are awake at the wrong hour, each in our own little corner of history. Now dim the lights, maybe let a fan hum softly in the background, and as the modern world fades, imagine waking up 2,500 years ago to a place where the sun never seemed to set, and personal hygiene was more of a philosophical idea than a practice. Welcome to ancient Greece, where the day begins early, ends late, and rarely goes the way you'd like. You wake to heat, not gentle warmth, not cosy comfort, but the slow, creeping roast of a sun that has decided your house is lunch. Your home is small, its walls made of sun-dried mud brick or rough stones pressed together with more hope than mortar. There's no insulation, no ceiling fan, no glass to close the windows, only wooden shutters that rattle in the wind and keep out about half the goats and none of the flies. The bed is a mat on the floor, stuffed with straw that crunches when you move and smells faintly of everyone who's ever slept on it before. If you're lucky, the lice have taken the night off. If not, they're your most loyal companions. Privacy isn't a concept here. You share your room with your family, your belongings, and possibly one suspiciously judgmental goat. Your personal space begins and ends wherever the goat isn't standing. By sunrise, the walls have soaked up enough heat to begin glowing with spite. You wake not because you're rested, but because the air itself feels angry. The roof groans, the dust floats, and you stretch carefully, avoiding the low ceiling beam that has claimed countless foreheads before yours. Outside, roosters are declaring war on the morning. Inside, your family is already arguing over whose turn it is to fetch water. Spoiler, it's yours. There's no running water in your kitchen, because there's no kitchen. Cooking happens in a corner of the room or in a clay pit outside, where yesterday's ashes wait like a small grey volcano. To wash, you don't turn a tap, you lift a jar. The public fountain is a walk away, and you carry back clay jars filled with water that sloshes just enough to bruise your shoulder. Drop one, and you lose not only a jar, but the will to live for the rest of the morning. Bathing, if you can call it that, comes later in the day, when the air cools and the neighbours have stopped watching. For now, you settle for splashing your face, rubbing a little olive oil on your skin, and scraping it off with a curved bronze blade called a strigil. Think of it as a combination of skincare routine and light self-harm. It doesn't clean you so much as rearrange the dirt into more flattering patterns. Everyone smells roughly the same, like sun, oil, and faint regret. There's no coffee to help you wake up. There's not even tea. Breakfast is waiting, though breakfast might be too generous a word. You chew a piece of barley bread called maza, stale, dense, and baked yesterday on hot stones until it became emotionally resistant to chewing. You dunk it into watered wine because the water alone isn't safe, and hope the mixture tastes slightly less like despair than usual. If you're lucky, there's a fig or a few olives. If you're unlucky, the bread has already developed a social life of its own. Either way, you eat in silence because chewing takes most of your energy. The sound of the city creeps in through the shutters, sandals on stone, donkeys braying, merchants shouting about things that may or may not exist. Someone nearby is already arguing about philosophy before breakfast, which is very Greek of them. The smell outside is a blend of baking clay, sweat, smoke, and the subtle perfume of a civilization that doesn't believe in sewers. You breathe it in and try not to pass out. The morning light paints everything gold, which would be beautiful if it weren't also blinding. You squint at the horizon and realise the day is just beginning. There's work to do, always. Hauling, weaving, building, selling, praying, surviving. No one is unemployed because no one can afford to be. And even if you wanted a day off, the gods would probably interpret it as an insult and send a thunderstorm directly over your head. By mid-morning, your tunic has already glued itself to your back. The air feels thick enough to chew, and the flies have chosen you as their personal form of entertainment. The city's noise blends into a steady hum, like the world's least soothing lullaby. You watch the sunlight crawl across the floor and briefly envy the shade beneath the donkey cart outside. Somewhere, a philosopher is declaring that true happiness lies in moderation. You'd like to moderate the temperature to bearable. For now, you endure, because that's what everyone does. You pick up the water jar again, step into the glare, and tell yourself it's just another day in paradise. And as the heat presses against your skin and the dust fills your lungs, you realise something quietly profound. The people who built Western civilization did it, mostly while sweating through their clothes. As we drift further into the story, the day continues, toward a meal that barely counts as food, and a definition of hygiene that might surprise you. But for now, you stand at the door of your tiny home, staring at the blinding light of another Greek morning and think, this is only the beginning. The sun hasn't even reached its full cruelty yet, but you already feel like bread left too close to the oven. Your morning meal waits on a clay table, if you can call it that, a slab of wood balanced on two uneven stones. On it sits the most underwhelming breakfast in history. A few crumbs of barley maza, a thin drizzle of olive oil, and a cup of watered wine pretending to be helpful. There is no milk, no sugar, no fruit platter arranged like a festival of health. Just stubborn simplicity. You tear the barley cake apart. It resists. It has the consistency of optimism that's been left out in the sun too long. Still, you chew. Barley was the backbone of the Greek diet, the ancient equivalent of instant noodles, cheap, filling, and emotionally neutral. The bread is baked from coarsely ground grain, mixed with water, then flattened on a hot stone until it becomes something between food and flooring. It tastes faintly of smoke, ashes, and necessity. A noble flavour if you're starving, which you often are. The wine helps, sort of. It's not the romantic red you imagine in amphorae with painted gods lounging on the side. It's more like liquid hope diluted to half strength. Watered wine wasn't a mark of moderation, it was survival. Straight wine was considered barbaric, but so was dying from river water. So everyone just compromised. A gesture of civilization mixed with bacteria management. The ratio, roughly 1 part wine to 3 parts water, though some claim it depended on how much you trusted your neighbourhood fountain. You take a sip. It tastes faintly of grapes and moral compromise. If you're a man, you sit cross-legged on a stool. If you're a woman, you sit somewhere less visible, or not at all. Meals are small and silent. Families don't linger over conversation or gratitude, mostly because there isn't much to discuss beyond what's missing. When there's cheese, it's goat cheese. When there's fruit, it's probably dried. Fish is rare unless you live by the coast, and meat is for festivals or funerals. Your ancestors would look at a modern breakfast buffet and assume you were some minor deity. You look out through the doorway at the dusty street. Children run barefoot, chasing a ball made from rags. A donkey complains about existence in a tone you deeply relate to. Somewhere a neighbour shouts about stolen figs. The world smells like smoke, sweat, and the faint sweetness of fermenting grapes. You think for a brief moment that it's almost beautiful. Then a fly lands in your cup. Clean water is always a gamble. In Athens, it comes from public fountains that rely on aqueducts and clay pipes. But maintenance isn't what you'd call consistent. You fetch water daily, hauling jars that weigh more than your sense of optimism, and when you finally pour it, the dust has already settled back into it like a reminder that purity is theoretical. Hence the wine. It's not indulgence, it's hygiene. You drink diluted alcohol because bacteria can't swim that well. It's science, or at least the ancient version of it, which mostly involved observation, tradition, and mild denial. After breakfast, the dishes don't get washed. They get wiped with yesterday's breadcrumbs, which is technically cleaning if you lower your standards far enough. Food scraps go to animals or to the street, which is basically the same thing. There are no bins, no drains, no waste management systems, just the quiet knowledge that the city's smell will sort itself out eventually. It never does. In wealthier homes, slaves or servants prepare the food and carry out the dishes. In poorer ones, everyone works. You grind barley at dawn, kneel by a hand mill that hums like monotony, and hope your knees hold out for another decade. The rhythm of grinding fills the morning, stone against stone, breath against exhaustion. If there's poetry in this life, it's written in the dust rising from the mill. As the sun climbs, the streets awaken. Vendors call out the prices of olives, figs, and hope. Men gather in the agora, the public square, to argue about politics or philosophy, both of which have the same outcome. No one wins, but everyone feels important. You pass by stalls selling pottery, sandals, fish still blinking from the sea, and fabrics dyed just enough to fool you into thinking you're wealthy. You clutch your small coin pouch tighter, pretending it has more than 2 bronze pieces. It doesn't. A beggar calls out to you. Missing an arm, maybe a leg, certainly most of his luck. He blesses you in the name of Apollo. You nod, but don't stop. You're late for a life that won't wait. Everyone here moves with purpose, even if that purpose is mostly survival. Athens hums like a living creature. Proud, hungry, a little vain, and always slightly behind on rent. You glance up toward the Acropolis, its marble glowing in the morning light. Temples gleam, banners flutter. It's hard not to feel awe. The gods, it seems, have good taste in architecture, but you know better. Those temples were built by people like you, sweating, cursing, unpaid. Perfection looks different when you've carried the stones for it. A philosopher in a tattered cloak stops you near the fountain. He asks whether virtue can exist without comfort. You consider your breakfast and answer, apparently yes. He smiles, pleased, as if you've just solved morality. You continue walking, feeling strangely proud, until you remember your feet are still sticky from olive oil. Virtue, it seems, also involves slipping hazards. By midday, your stomach is already reminding you that breakfast was a rumour. The heat thickens, the streets shimmer. You dream of shade, or maybe of a small breeze sent by a merciful god who's having a generous day. But this is Greece. The gods are busy arguing about jealousy and lightning. You'll have to settle for standing in the shadow of your own disappointment. As the hours crawl forward, you find yourself thinking that history books forgot the most important truth about this world, that civilization is mostly endurance disguised as culture. You chew stale bread, sip sour wine, and pretend it's all part of the plan. And in a strange way, it is. Because even in their hunger, their sweat, their dust-covered dignity, the Greeks were building something bigger, a foundation of ideas that would outlast every broken jar and every unwashed hand. From here, the story opens into the rituals of keeping clean, or at least appearing to. Because after a breakfast like this, you'd better hope the day offers some form of redemption, even if that redemption comes in the form of a bronze blade and a little too much olive oil. The day has warmed into its full confidence now. The light feels less like sunshine and more like interrogation. The city hums, sandals scrape, donkeys complain, and everyone pretends they're fine. You are not fine. The sweat trickles in places that don't need reminders of gravity, and the air tastes faintly of cooked clay. It's time to clean up, though here, Clean is mostly a state of mind. Bathing in ancient Greece is not a private affair. It is a group activity, a public confession of dust. The rich might have small bathing rooms at home, but most people head to the communal baths, part social club, part hygiene experiment. You take a jar of olive oil, because soap hasn't been invented yet, and walk toward the baths with the resigned determination of someone about to polish themselves like a piece of furniture. The bathhouse is a low stone building smelling faintly of smoke, oil, and civic optimism. Inside, people are everywhere, standing, chatting, stretching, judging. Some are philosophers, others are merchants, slaves, soldiers, old men arguing about youth. You pay a small fee and find a corner of marble that's already slippery with effort. The process begins with oil. You pour it onto your skin until you glisten like a freshly grilled vegetable. The heat makes it spread easily, turning sweat into a sort of glaze. The olive oil isn't scented or luxurious. It's the same oil used for lamps and food, multi-purpose living at its finest. You rub it into your arms, your chest, your legs, feeling both ridiculous and oddly proud. You are, after all, participating in 2,000 years of skincare tradition powered entirely by groceries. Then comes the strigil, a curved bronze scraper that looks halfway between a spoon and a weapon. You drag it across your skin, and the mixture of oil, sweat, and dust peels away like proof of effort. It's oddly satisfying and slightly alarming. You tell yourself it's exfoliation. The Greeks told themselves it was purification. Either way, the sound of bronze against flesh echoes softly, rhythmic and strangely intimate. Around you, others scrape too, a chorus of metallic whispers and occasional grunts of discomfort. The residue is collected and wiped off with cloths. Some bath attendants, usually slaves, help with this task, though the level of enthusiasm varies. You pay them a coin or two, and they act as if they've never met you. No one makes eye contact. Everyone pretends this is normal. The bathing water itself isn't hot, unless you're in one of the few cities with a heating system, which for you is unlikely. Most of the time, you rinse with cold water poured from jars, shivering slightly, convincing yourself it's refreshing. The Romans will later perfect this into the spa experience, complete with heated floors and steam. But right now, you just have a bucket, a draft, and a vague hope of feeling human again. After scraping and rinsing, people often anoint themselves again, because paradoxically, the way to be clean is to reapply the thing you just scraped off. Olive oil seals in whatever freshness you've imagined. Some add a touch of perfume if they can afford it, though the scents are more theatrical than pleasant. Myrrh, resin, sometimes the faint tang of fermented flowers. You smell like ambition and ancient chemistry. While you're drying off, a man nearby begins reciting poetry to no one in particular. That's normal. Bathhouses are not just for cleanliness, they're for conversation. Here, ideas flow as freely as the lukewarm water. Debates about politics, philosophy, and who's sleeping with whose wife are as common as body odour. Some come here to show off their physiques. Others come to demonstrate they still have opinions. You keep quiet, focusing on not slipping. You might wonder about soap. It will be invented later, in places where people have both leisure and lard. For now, your skin glows with oil, your pores are open, and your sense of self-worth has been restored to something resembling hope. You look around and notice everyone else looks exactly the same, shiny, slightly pink, and pretending this process works. Laundry follows similar principles. Clothing doesn't get washed often. When it does, it's in cold water with a mixture of ash and crushed beans acting as primitive detergent. Garments are beaten against rocks or trampled underfoot. Cleanliness, like democracy, is participatory and exhausting. Most people own only a few tunics. You rotate them until they develop what historians might politely call a patina of familiarity. As you step outside, the sunlight catches the sheen on your arms. You are officially the cleanest you've been all week, which is not saying much. The wind carries the smell of the city, Smoke from cooking fires, animal droppings, the metallic tang of the blacksmith's forge, and immediately begins undoing your efforts. A fly lands on your shoulder, apparently unimpressed with your transformation. You flick it away with the quiet dignity of someone who knows resistance is futile. Some people claim bathing also purifies the soul. You doubt this, but you admit the process feels symbolic. The scraping, the rinsing, the oiling, it's less about hygiene and more about starting over. A small ritual of order in a world of dust. You emerge from the bath slightly lighter, not because the dirt is gone, but because you've earned the illusion of control. Children splash near the fountain outside, laughing. A woman pours water into a jar with practiced grace. The sunlight glints off the surface, dazzling and cruel. Somewhere in the distance, the temple bells chime, summoning the faithful to remind them that cleanliness may be next to godliness, but only if you can afford the oil. You pause, letting the heat soak into your clean skin again, realizing it was a short-lived victory. Still, there's something oddly peaceful in surrender. The city may never stop being dusty, the air may never cool, but at least for a moment, you feel alive in the same way the marble statues do. Gleaming, motionless, and pretending perfection isn't painful. If we follow the thread a little further, the day is far from over. There's work waiting, gossip to overhear, and a tunic to wrestle into submission. But for now, under the blinding sun and the smell of olives, you've achieved the impossible. You're clean, briefly, and still breathing. The sun has climbed higher, and so have your regrets. You've survived the ancient skincare ritual, glowed like a polished amphora for a few minutes, and now it's time to get dressed. A process that is somehow both simple and dangerous. Your wardrobe, if you can call it that, consists of two rectangles of cloth. The first is the chiton, a linen or woolen garment that looks like someone gave up halfway through inventing shirts. You step into it, lift it over your shoulders, and pin it in place with metal brooches called fibulae. They sparkle faintly in the light, which is a nice touch, until you remember that these pins are essentially small daggers resting near your neck. The fabric is light but scratchy, and it's never quite the right length. The Greeks were masters of geometry, yet their clothing remains a constant tripping hazard. There are no seams, no stitching, just clever folding, and the eternal hope that nothing unravels at the wrong moment. Modesty depends entirely on gravity and luck. When the wind picks up, philosophy meets exposure. Over the chiton goes the himation, a larger piece of heavier cloth that drapes around your shoulders and sometimes over your head. It's elegant in theory, like living inside a curtain. In practice, it's a battle between fabric and patience. The folds slip, the edges drag in the dust. You readjust it every few minutes and pretend that's a cultural statement. Colour says everything about your social standing. Pure white or soft beige marks the poor. The tone of dust and resignation. Dyed garments are luxury, especially in deep purples or reds, made from crushed sea snails so rare that wearing them is basically announcing you have both money and no sense of smell. Blue is modest, green practical, but most people wear whatever shade their fabric turned after several washes and one unfortunate rainstorm. Footwear is optional. Sandals exist, but they're more suggestion than comfort. The straps bite at your feet. The soles wear thin, and the roads are a mixture of hot stone, manure, and ambition. Many people simply walk barefoot, which at least saves on shoe repairs and emotional attachment. You try it and instantly regret your curiosity. The ground is hot enough to teach humility. There is, of course, no such thing as underwear. The concept will arrive centuries later and be hailed as progress. For now, you rely on faith and careful posture. The breeze, though rare, is both your ally and your nemesis. You quickly learn the art of walking like you have dignity while holding your tunic together with one hand, an ancient balancing act between grace and survival. Jewellery, for those who can afford it, adds a flash of humanity. Simple bronze bracelets, glass beads, or a tiny pendant shaped like an owl or a shell. Everything carries meaning. The owl for wisdom, the shell for love, the bronze pin for practical self-defense. Nothing goes to waste. Wealthier citizens wear gold or silver, though the shine attracts envy faster than admiration. In Athens, moderation is virtue, except when it isn't. Women's clothing follows the same principle, but with more fabric and less comfort. The peplos is a long, heavy garment pinned at the shoulders, sometimes reaching the ground. It swishes elegantly if you're standing still, but becomes an architectural project when walking uphill. Female modesty is a full-time occupation. Outside the home, women often cover their heads with veils, not from religion, but reputation. A respectable woman is invisible, quiet, and mildly exhausted. Children wear smaller versions of adult clothes until they outgrow them or tear them beyond repair. There's no children's fashion, just smaller rectangles of linen and a lot of parental resignation. Babies are swaddled tightly in strips of cloth, creating the general impression of small, slightly annoyed mummies. Once dressed, you check your reflection in a polished bronze mirror. It's small, warped, and brutally honest. You look like a philosophical burrito. The fabric sticks to your oiled skin. Dust has already found you again. Still, there's a quiet pride in this simplicity. The folds, the weight, the texture, they connect you to everyone else in the city. No one looks perfect, and that's strangely comforting. The heat grows. You step into the street, your sandals clapping against the stone. The air vibrates with sound, the bleating of goats, the chatter of vendors, the laughter of children dodging carts. You pass a woman balancing a jar of water on her head, the movement smooth as breath. You envy her grace, even as sweat trickles down your back like a slow apology. Fashion, if we can call it that, is less about beauty and more about endurance. The Greeks believed beauty reflected inner virtue, but they also believed virtue came from suffering. That explains the footwear. The ideal citizen is balanced, neither too wealthy nor too poor, neither too modest nor too bold, which in reality means everyone is slightly uncomfortable at all times. You tug at your chiton and try to remember that discomfort is cultural. Somewhere in the marketplace, a philosopher is announcing that pleasure is a distraction from the pursuit of wisdom. You consider inviting him to wear wool in summer and see how wise he feels after an hour. As the wind shifts, the smell of the harbour drifts through the city. Salt, fish, and something that might once have been moral clarity. The linen flutters against your legs, and for a moment you understand the elegance hidden in all this effort. The fabric moves like water, the folds catching light, the dust swirling around your feet. You may be sticky, sweaty, and halfway to a sunburn, but in that fleeting second, you look like you belong to a civilization that invented sculpture just to make standing still seem impressive. From here, the story opens into duty, the weight of being a citizen in a city that expects everything and forgives nothing. You've dressed the part, now you must live it. And in a place where democracy was born but empathy rarely voted, your day is about to become even more complicated. The morning burns into noon, and the hum of the city thickens like stew. You've endured the heat, the oil, and the fabric origami that passes for clothing. But in this world, being dressed isn't enough. You're also expected to be useful, preferably in the kind of way that involves holding a weapon and not questioning why. If you are a man, citizenship and soldiering are the same sentence. The city gives you rights, but also a constant reminder that those rights need guarding with your body. The word hoplite drifts through conversations like an expectation. It means you holding a spear, standing shoulder to shoulder with other men, forming a wall of flesh and bronze. It's not optional. It's a civic obligation wrapped in heroism and sweat. The training begins early. Spartan boys start at 7, turned into walking discipline by teachers with sticks. Athenian youths begin at 18, learning to march, swim, and pretend courage is a rational decision. Even if you're a philosopher's son, you don't escape it. Socrates fought in armour before he ever fought with words. Everyone does their time. Everyone learns that honour looks better from the front line than from behind it. But there's a catch. The city doesn't provide your gear. You bring your own: helmet, breastplate, greaves, shield, spear and sword. A full set of bronze armour weighs as much as a small donkey, costs more than most houses, and smells permanently of metal and regret. Only the moderately wealthy can afford it. The poor go without, which means they serve as lightly armed auxiliaries, or in many cases just pray from the sidelines. Your shield, called a hoplon, gives the soldiers their name. It's a wide, heavy disc made from wood faced with bronze, big enough to hide behind but not enough to feel safe. On it, some paint symbols: snakes, eyes, lightning bolts, not for fashion, but intimidation. You hold it with your left arm, your right hand gripping a spear about 2.5 meters long. Together the men form a phalanx, a tight formation where survival depends entirely on the person next to you not panicking. The formation moves like a single organism, slow and deliberate. The shields overlap, the spears extend, and the sound of hundreds of sandals striking the earth becomes a heartbeat. In theory, it's unity. In practice, it's group anxiety with good marketing. If one man stumbles, the line buckles. If fear spreads, the formation collapses. The army becomes a crowd. The crowd becomes a tragedy. You stand in the sun, imagining the weight of armour pressing against your ribs, the sting of sweat trickling beneath the bronze, the ache in your legs as the hours stretch on. There is no music, no marching band, no cinematic soundtrack, just breath and dust and the whisper of gods who may or may not be paying attention. For those too poor for bronze, there's always the oar. Naval warfare keeps Greece afloat, literally. The trireme, a sleek warship with 3 levels of rowers, cuts through the sea like a knife. It's powered by men, 170 of them, each rowing in rhythm, lungs burning, backs slick with salt and exhaustion. The command: keep time or break the ship's spine. You row for hours, sometimes days, eating salted fish and bread so dry it qualifies as ballast. The sea breeze feels merciful, but the blisters remind you that mercy is temporary. For women, duty looks different but feels the same. When the men march to war, the women take over the impossible, running households with no income, managing farms, praying at temples for news that rarely comes. In Sparta, women tell their husbands, "Come back with your shield," or "on it." In Athens, they simply wait. The silence between battles is its own kind of warfare. War is constant background noise. City-states fight each other over pride, trade routes, or the philosophical question of who gets to be right. Athens against Sparta, Thebes against everyone, alliances forming and breaking like fragile pottery. Peace exists only as a pause between rehearsals. The Greek calendar could be measured not in months but in sieges. Yet, despite the chaos, there's ceremony and battle. Before marching, soldiers visit temples to offer sacrifices. A goat, a lamb, sometimes just a handful of barley. The priests read omens in the smoke. If the flame flickers the wrong way, they delay the campaign. You can't question it. The gods, unpredictable as they are, double as military advisors. It's comforting in a strange way. When the divine is as indecisive as human generals, no one feels personally responsible for failure. The reality of combat is far less noble than the poems claim. It's loud, confusing, and short. Spears break, shields slip, and the ground becomes mud mixed with fear. You smell blood before you see it. The phalanx crushes forward, an avalanche of bodies, until one side breaks. Victory is measured in the number of men still breathing when the dust clears. The survivors gather their dead, burn them, and tell stories that sound more like hope than history. Back in the city, those who return parade through the streets wearing garlands of olive leaves. They're heroes for a day, then workers again. No medals, no pensions, just calloused hands and the faint tremor that comes from remembering. The poets make songs about them, but the songs forget the heat, the smell, the trembling knees. Glory, it seems, edits out the noise. As you walk through the agora later, you see men arguing about strategy as if they were there. One claims the gods favoured Athens because the wind shifted. Another insists it was discipline, not divinity. You keep walking, quietly aware that history is mostly written by survivors with good handwriting. Somewhere in the shade, a sculptor carves a statue of a warrior, tall, calm, perfect. His marble face shows no fear, no sweat, no exhaustion. You pause, studying the figure. You know it's a lie, but a beautiful one. The Greeks perfected that. The art of making suffering look serene. As the afternoon deepens, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer drifts through the air. Bronze is being shaped again. New helmets, new shields, the next war already waiting. You realise the rhythm never stops. Civilization marches, limps, or rows forward, powered by people who keep doing what they must, not because they love it, but because they can't imagine not doing it. Our quiet exploration now turns to those who had no armour, no vote, no freedom to choose, the ones who kept the city running while others fought for its glory. You've seen how citizens earned pride with bronze. Now you'll see how others paid the price in silence. The sound of hammers fades, replaced by the steady rhythm of a loom. It's a domestic percussion, soft and endless, marking time inside the quiet heart of an Athenian home. You hear the creak of wood, the whisper of thread pulled tight, the sigh of someone who will never see her city except through shutters. Women here do not walk freely in the streets. Their world begins at the courtyard wall and rarely ventures beyond it. The house is both protection and prison. Walls whitewashed with care, floors swept each morning, the smell of bread drifting from the hearth. There's beauty in the simplicity, but the air carries a quiet resignation, like a bird that has learned not to fly too far. You watch a woman at her loom, back straight, fingers steady. The thread slides between her hands, smooth as habit. Each line she weaves is a kind of patience. The pattern grows, simple but endless. Behind her, a child crawls in circles, and an older girl grinds barley on a stone. Rhythm slow, shoulders tight. Outside, men shout about democracy. Inside, history happens in whispers. Education for girls is minimal, enough to count coins, keep a home, and avoid embarrassment in public speech. The rest is inherited knowledge. How to stretch flour, when to water the plants, how to fold silence into obedience. Marriage comes early, often arranged, and always strategic. A girl of 14 might be promised to a man twice her age, her dowry negotiated like a business deal. Love, if it appears, is treated like a pleasant accident. When the husband is away, serving in war, voting, or debating in the agora, the wife becomes the city's quiet spine. She tends the fire, manages the slaves, raises children who may not survive their first fever. She wakes before dawn to grind grain, her arms moving in practiced circles, the air filling with the smell of crushed wheat and the thin dust that coats her skin. By noon, she is covered in flour and sweat, her hair tied up with a strip of linen already grey from work. Her world is small, but her endurance is infinite. In Athens, women's names are rarely written in public records. Their tombstones mention only whose wife or mother they were. In philosophy, they are footnotes. In art, they are muses, silent, beautiful, and carefully fictional. The goddess Athena has temples, statues, festivals. The women who share her name have chores, fatigue, and the same view of the same courtyard every day. Athenian men call this arrangement order, a society built on balance. They claim that men rule by reason, women by instinct, as if this division were cosmic law. You might wonder how reason looks from the inside of a house, where the only view is a sliver of sunlight between two shutters. But not all Greece looks like Athens. Travel a few days south, and you find Sparta, a land of stone, sweat, and contradictions. There, girls run, wrestle, and train beside boys. They learn music and poetry, not for art's sake, but for discipline. Spartan women own land, inherit wealth, and speak freely. To outsiders, this looks like freedom. To Spartans, it's eugenics with better marketing. Women are strong because they must give birth to soldiers. Love is measured by the fitness of the child, not the happiness of the mother. You trade one kind of silence for another. Back in Athens, the afternoon passes in small repetitions. The spindle turns, the thread winds, the baby cries, the neighbour's donkey brays as if arguing with fate. The sun crawls along the walls, painting lines of gold that shift and fade. Occasionally, a breeze sneaks through the shutters, stirring the dust in the air like a brief promise. For a heartbeat, you glimpse the city beyond. The tiled roofs, the Acropolis glowing in the distance, the faint echo of voices rising from the agora. Then the shutters close again. The women talk quietly among themselves, sharing gossip, recipes, warnings. They laugh, not loudly, but enough to remember that joy still exists. One hums a song about Persephone, the girl who vanished underground each winter and returned in spring. The others join softly, weaving their voices like threads through the air. It's the sound of survival, small, persistent, easily overlooked but always there. In the evening, men return home with the dust of the city still clinging to their feet. They eat first, talk first, sleep first. Women clear the bowls, sweep the floor, check the fire. When everything finally quiets, they sit in the courtyard under the stars, hands resting in their laps, eyes half closed. The sky feels wide, almost forgiving. For a few minutes they are simply themselves, not wives, not mothers, not property, just people breathing in the same air the gods once claimed. You might think they are powerless, but power takes many forms. They keep families alive, preserve stories, pass down rituals, and maintain the rhythm that keeps Athens functioning. If the men are the city's voice, the women are its heartbeat, steady, unacknowledged, and impossible to silence completely. From the street, you see only the shuttered windows, the faint outline of movement behind them. It's easy to mistake quiet for emptiness, but every loom stroke, every grain ground, every whisper shared is a small act of endurance. And endurance, in the end, is its own kind of rebellion. As the night falls and the last threads are knotted, you realise how much of civilization depends on invisible labour. Philosophy praises virtue, democracy praises equality, but equality stops at the doorway. Inside, the true citizens of endurance go uncounted. If we follow the thread a little further, those voices behind the shutters fade into the crowd outside, men arguing about freedom, justice, and the price of fish. Unaware they are the only ones allowed to speak. The sound of the loom fades into the sound of shouting, and the story moves from the silent rooms of women to the noisy stage of democracy. The quiet rhythm of the loom fades into the hum of the streets. The air outside is different, heavier, louder, and full of men who believe that conversation equals civilization. You step into the agora, Athens' public square, the city's open-air brain. Here, ideas and olives are traded with the same enthusiasm, and neither comes cheap. Every voice competes for attention. Philosophers preach about virtue near the fish stalls. Orators rehearse their speeches while someone argues over the freshness of squid. The smell of salt, smoke, and sweat wraps around you like an unpleasant reminder that freedom has an odour. Democracy lives here, though not everyone is invited to the party. In Athens, the word citizen means something very specific: male, free-born, of Athenian parents, and ideally loud. Women, slaves, and foreigners make up most of the population, but they stand outside the definition, watching the debates from the edges like ghosts in daylight. Only about 1 in 10 people can actually vote or speak in the assembly. It's not so much government by the people as government by the available. Still, it's revolutionary for its time. The city meets not in a palace, but on a hillside beneath the open sky. No thrones, no crowns, just a crowd of men with opinions. They gather at dawn, sitting on rough stone benches, the Acropolis looming above like a silent supervisor. The debates can last all day, fueled by pride and sunstroke. Decisions are made by show of hands, sometimes by shouting, sometimes by who sounds most confident. It's less a science than a performance. Charisma counts more than evidence. If you speak well, people call you wise. If you hesitate, they call you untrustworthy. The art of democracy is learning to sound certain about things you can't control. You listen as one man proposes a new tax, another complains about military spending, and a third insists the gods will handle everything if properly flattered. The crowd murmurs approval or disgust. Occasionally, someone throws a fig. There are no microphones, no order, no mercy. And yet somehow, the city runs. Public offices are filled not by election but by lottery. Yes, random chance decides who oversees the treasury or judges a murder trial. The logic is that equality should come from unpredictability, that anyone might be chosen to serve so everyone behaves responsibly. In theory, it's brilliant. In practice, it's chaos in a linen robe. Imagine a fishmonger managing public finances one week and judging a homicide the next. Imagine your neighbour who still owes you a goat suddenly in charge of foreign policy. It's democracy's first experiment in what could possibly go wrong. Somehow it works more often than it should, possibly because everyone's too proud to admit when it doesn't. But Athens also invents a safety valve for too much popularity: ostracism. If a man grows too powerful, too admired, or simply too irritating, citizens can vote to exile him for 10 years. They write his name on shards of broken pottery, ostraca, drop them into urns, and count the fragments like tally marks of rejection. The sound of clay scraping against clay echoes through the square like the rustle of paper ballots from a civilization still half asleep. It's the original cancel culture, just with more sandals and fewer hashtags. You can't appeal, can't protest, can't even pack up your furniture. The decision is final and the message is clear. No one is indispensable. Athens worships moderation even in fame. The system isn't perfect, but it's alive. Every decision, every argument, every shout contributes to a grand experiment in collective noise. There's no script, no divine ruler, no single truth, just people, flawed, passionate and slightly sunburned, trying to govern themselves. Nearby, a group of jurors gathers under a canopy. They're ordinary men, sworn to judge cases ranging from theft to treason. Some carry pebbles used for voting, white for innocent, black for guilty. You can almost hear the clatter as they drop them into bronze urns, justice measured in sound rather than words. A man's fate decided by a handful of stones and a good speech. The idea of fairness is still forming here, fragile and inconsistent. Wealth helps, connections help more. But every voice in the crowd insists that equality exists, because saying it makes it feel true. Athens believes in ideals the same way it believes in the gods, with enthusiasm and selective memory. You wander through the agora, stepping around goats and philosophers. One man lectures about geometry, tracing lines in the dust with a stick. Another recites verses about the glory of the city, while his audience quietly nods and pretends not to yawn. A few slaves carry baskets of figs through the crowd, unnoticed, but essential. Democracy is vibrant, messy, and deeply dependent on the people it refuses to acknowledge. From a nearby temple portico, the statues of the gods look down with stony patience. Perhaps they're amused. After all, mortals have found a way to argue endlessly without divine intervention. The gods may still demand sacrifices, but the citizens demand debates, and both seem equally unpredictable. As the sun lowers, casting long shadows across the square, the crowd begins to thin. The air cools slightly, though the smell of humanity lingers. You stand among the fading voices, realizing how extraordinary it is, this attempt at equality, born from inequality, sustained by belief. The idea itself is fragile, but it's also contagious. You imagine the sound of thousands of years from now, ballots dropping, parliaments shouting, campaigns promising change, and realize that every democracy since still carries this noise. The accents are different, the sandals replaced by shoes, but the rhythm is the same. Evening falls. The last echo of argument fades behind you as the city settles into its routine. The voices of free men grow quiet, replaced by the clatter of pots, the low hum of homes preparing for another day. Freedom, it seems, has office hours. As we drift further into the story, the shouting fades and the silence returns. Silence filled by those who have no voice, yet carry the city on their backs. You've heard the noise of democracy. Now you'll hear the whisper of the ones it forgets. The marketplace sleeps now. The last echoes of argument fade down the marble steps, and the dust settles over the words freedom and virtue, like a quiet correction. When the citizens go home to rest their voices, the city keeps breathing, moved by hands that will never be named. Slavery in ancient Greece isn't an exception. It's the machinery behind everything that looks civilized. Every loaf of bread, every stone of the Parthenon, every amphora of wine owes something to a pair of unseen hands. The word slave here is not whispered. It's spoken casually, as if ownership were a natural element, like air or gravity. The philosophers debate the meaning of justice, while someone else sweeps the floor beneath their sandals. You see them in the morning light, men and women carrying jars, driving donkeys, tending fires that never go out. Some are born into it, others were captured in wars, sold in markets, or traded for debts. A few are educated scribes, teachers, even accountants. Proof that intellect doesn't guarantee freedom. In Athens, a slave might manage a workshop or teach a child how to read, yet still have no name of his own. In the mines at Lorient, far from the city's marble glow, the work is endless and without witness. The tunnels are narrow, carved into rock by men and children who will never see the sky again. The air down there is thick with dust and tin smoke. The only light comes from flickering oil lamps that burn more smoke than flame. The sound of picks against stone is rhythmic, like a heartbeat muffled by earth. The metal they dig out, silver for coins, lead for pipes, fuels the Athenian miracle. The city's temples shine while their workers vanish in the dark. Slavery here is so normalized that even moral thinkers defend it. Aristotle calls it natural, reasoning that some people are born to rule and others to obey, as if fairness was simply a matter of design. It's a logic polished to brilliance and cruelty at once. He invents ethics, then carves a loophole through it wide enough for a chain to pass. At home, household slaves wake before dawn. They grind grain, fetch water, carry children, sweep the floors, and listen to conversations they'll never join. They eat after everyone else, if food remains. Theirs is a life made of repetition, invisible, endless, and necessary. Yet many households depend on them completely. Athens calls itself the cradle of democracy, but its cradle rests on someone else's back. Some slaves save coins from errands or side work. If they're lucky, they can buy freedom after years of obedience. Freedmen sometimes stay as paid servants, because leaving means losing the only life they know. Freedom, when it comes, is fragile, a thin paper shield against poverty. The city calls them metikoi, resident foreigners. They can work but never vote. Liberty here is a word with layers, each thinner than the last. Not all slavery is cruel in the same way. Some masters are harsh, others almost paternal. But the system itself has no mercy built in. A slave can be beaten for speaking out of turn, sold for aging too slowly, or traded as casually as grain. It's not evil in their eyes, just efficiency. The horror lies in how ordinary it feels. You imagine walking through the streets at night. The citizens sleep behind locked doors. The slaves move quietly through courtyards, tending lamps and livestock, making the city ready for another day. The moon reflects off the rooftops, pale and distant. Somewhere, a woman hums softly as she grinds the last of the barley for morning bread. The rhythm is slow, steady, heartbreakingly calm. Civilization, it turns out, is built to that rhythm. In the workshops, metal sparks leap in the darkness. Potters spin clay on wheels, their hands shaping beauty that they'll never own. A vase decorated with gods and heroes will be sold to adorn a wealthy home. No one will know the artist's name, only the buyer's taste. Art, like politics, follows the rule of ownership. There are small acts of rebellion, of course. Slaves steal time, an extra breath, a longer glance, a whispered joke. They sing work songs that carry double meanings, prayers disguised as a rhythm. Some flee into the countryside, vanishing into forests or bandit bands, their freedom bought with hunger. Others accept their fate and find small pride in mastery, the perfect loaf, the flawless pot, the spotless floor. Resistance comes in many quiet forms. Even in religion, the hierarchy persists. Slaves can worship the gods but never stand beside their masters in the temple. Offerings from their wages are accepted but rarely acknowledged. Yet they still pray, to Hermes for luck, to Demeter for food, to Asclepius for health. The gods, at least, don't check citizenship rolls. By day, philosophers debate what makes a man virtuous. By night, slaves sweep the marble where those debates took place. The contrast would be comic if it weren't so precise. Athens loves to define humanity, but only within certain walls. The irony is sharp, but so is the endurance. The slaves keep the world moving, quietly, endlessly. Without them, the philosophers would starve, the soldiers would thirst, the temples would crumble. Yet their stories vanish into the background, erased not by cruelty but by habit. History forgets them the way a city forgets the hands that built it. You stand on a hill overlooking Athens, the wind dry and dusty, carrying the faint scent of smoke from the silver mines. The city gleams in the sun, perfect and proud. Below the marble, the ground hides the bones of labour. The contrast is breathtaking and absurd. Greatness, it seems, is always under construction, usually by someone unpaid. From here, the trail of voices leads you back into the noise, not of hammers or debates, but of applause. The stage awaits, the masks are ready, and the city will soon watch itself act out its contradictions. Theatres fill, philosophers preach, and Athens performs its ideals for anyone awake enough to listen. As we drift further into the story, you leave the shadows of the workshops behind and step into the bright echo of laughter and argument, where tragedy, comedy, and philosophy share the same stage, and every citizen pretends to understand the play. The morning sun rises again over the white stones of Athens, and the city wakes with purpose. The silence of night is gone. In its place comes the chorus of sandals, shouts, and the occasional philosophical argument shouted through breakfast. Athens is never quiet for long. Noise is its favourite form of proof that civilization is still working. You follow the crowd uphill toward the theatre, the great meeting place of minds, voices, and drama. The smell of dust and roasted chickpeas fills the air. Thousands are gathering under the open sky, fanning themselves with scraps of palm leaves, waiting to be entertained or enlightened, whichever happens first. The Greeks invented theatre not as leisure, but as religion in disguise. Plays were offerings to Dionysus, god of wine and chaos, which explains why the performances often end in disaster and applause. The theatre of Dionysus spreads before you like a great stone bowl. Its seats rise in semicircles up the hillside, marble gleaming in the sun. From the front row, you can see the stage clearly. A circular dance floor, a small set for palaces or tombs, and behind it, the city itself, Athens as backdrop and witness. You find a seat somewhere in the middle, where the breeze might visit occasionally if the gods are feeling generous. The play begins. The chorus enters, 50 men in identical masks and flowing robes. Their voices rise together in a rhythm that sounds like both singing and warning. The actors step forward, their masks painted with wide eyes and frozen smiles. One speaks, the other replies. The chorus answers them both. The story unfolds in poetry and thunder. Tragedy, for the Greeks, isn't entertainment, it's therapy. It teaches the audience what happens when pride, ambition, or curiosity go unchecked. It's emotional housekeeping for a city constantly flirting with disaster. People come to weep publicly, loudly, and then leave feeling somehow purified. The logic is simple. Suffer collectively, heal collectively. Even heartbreak has civic value. But not all plays are tragic. Sometimes the city needs laughter more than catharsis. Comedy, that strange twin of tragedy, turns the same gods and heroes into punchlines. The playwright Aristophanes, for example, mocks politicians, philosophers, and the audience all at once. He's the ancient equivalent of a late-night host, except with more tunics and fewer commercial breaks. In one play, women seize control of the government to prove they can't do worse. In another, a man sues his neighbour for having too much smoke in his prayers. The crowd roars with laughter, some out of joy, others out of recognition. Humour here is democracy's pressure valve. It keeps the city from exploding under its own seriousness. Behind the laughter, though, there's always philosophy waiting in the wings. You can't throw a grape in Athens without hitting a man explaining the meaning of virtue. They gather in the agora, in the gymnasia, even outside the theatres, turning every conversation into an argument about truth. Socrates is the master of this chaos. Barefoot, patient, and endlessly curious, he approaches strangers with questions that sound harmless until you realise you no longer know what you believe. He asks what justice means. You answer confidently, then less confidently, then not at all. He smiles, not cruelly but knowingly. For him, ignorance isn't shameful, it's a starting point. The problem is, no one likes being turned into a starting point. Eventually the city grows tired of being questioned. They accuse him of corrupting the youth and making the gods look foolish. Both charges are accurate, but mostly inconvenient. Still, you can't escape the charm of the place. Athens hums with talk and thought. The sound of sandals scuffing stone, of flutes playing in side streets, of the chorus rehearsing near the temple, all of it blends into the background like the heartbeat of a restless mind. Ideas here aren't written first. They're spoken, shouted, sung, and debated until they crystallize into something resembling sense. You walk through the agora after the play ends. Actors pass by, masks under their arms, sweat shining on their foreheads. Philosophers argue near a fruit stall. The smell of figs mingles with the faint odour of goat. Somewhere, a group of boys recites verses by Homer, their voices rising and falling in rhythm like waves. Everything is conversation, art, commerce, worship, gossip. To live in Athens is to live out loud. Yet there's something fragile beneath the brilliance. The same city that builds theatres also builds walls, and within those walls people grow impatient with too much thought. Democracy tolerates free speech until someone says the wrong thing. The line between debate and danger is as thin as a papyrus scroll. Later that evening, as twilight colours the stones gold and violet, you sit near the stage once more. The chorus is gone now, only the cicadas remain, chanting their own tired song of persistence. The marble holds the day's heat. You can still smell the wine spilled beneath the seats, the faint salt of tears left from a tragedy. the laughter that turned too real. It strikes you that Athens is less a city and more a performance that never ends. Everyone plays a part, the actors, the thinkers, the slaves, even the audience. The stage is everywhere, and the masks never fully come off. The philosopher questions truth, the playwright mocks it, the politician sells it, and the people cheer as if that were victory enough. As the stars appear, the wind from the sea brushes your face, carrying the faint echo of applause. You imagine it travelling beyond time, through Roman arenas, Shakespeare's Globe, modern theatres glowing with electric light. The stage has changed, but the noise remains. Humans still gather in the dark to watch themselves pretend they understand. From here, the story bends gently toward its shadow. The gods above, the plagues below, and the thin line of faith stretched between them. You've seen how Athens laughs at itself. Now you'll see how it prays. Night has barely finished before the gods start making demands again. The city wakes to smoke, prayers, and the smell of burnt offerings drifting from every temple. Athens never really separates the sacred from the daily. Worship here is less about faith and more about insurance. You thank the gods for everything that hasn't gone wrong yet, and bribe them to keep it that way. The temples glitter on every hill. The Acropolis rises above them all, marble gleaming in the morning sun like the world's most expensive apology. Inside, priests pour wine on altars and burn fat from sacrificed animals, sending thick columns of smoke toward the sky. The logic is simple. The higher the smoke, the better the connection. You might call it divine networking. The gods themselves are not invisible ideals, but larger, louder versions of people. Ambitious, jealous, dramatic. Zeus throws lightning when ignored. Hera plots revenge when crossed. Aphrodite turns traction into currency. You don't worship perfection, you negotiate with personalities. Every prayer is a small business meeting with eternity. Offerings vary by budget. The wealthy bring bulls and sheep. The poor settle for a handful of barley, a honey cake, or a promise muttered under breath. Goats are a favourite. Small, noisy, and symbolic of both fertility and stubbornness. They bleat their way up the temple steps as if protesting their own fate, and no one blames them. The priest's knife flashes, the blood spills neatly into a bowl. The gods, it's believed, appreciate the efficiency. Festivals keep the rhythm of life. There's always one coming, celebrating one god or another. You might attend the Panathenaea for Athena, with processions of maidens carrying woven robes to dress the statue of the goddess. You might join the Dionysia, where wine flows like mercy and men dance in masks until philosophy becomes a physical condition. These events are the city's heartbeat, half devotion, half excuse to stay up all night. But devotion has a darker side. When things go wrong, Athens blames itself first, then the gods. A drought, an eclipse, a failed harvest. Each one a divine hint that someone has upset Olympus. And if nature's anger isn't clear, enough there's always the plague. It starts quietly, as all disasters do. A few fevers, a cough that doesn't fade, a neighbour buried too quickly. Then it spreads, devouring the city faster than prayer can keep up. The year is around 430 before the Common Era, and Athens is locked in a war it can't escape. Refugees crowd behind its walls for safety. The air grows foul. The wells go bad. Doctors try herbs and hope. Priests offer sacrifices until even the goats run short. The temples fill with the sick and the dying. The historian Thucydides survives and writes that the disease defied explanation. People burned with fever, their tongues parched, their breath foul, their bodies covered in sores. The smell of death hung over the streets. No one dared touch the dead. Even the birds that fed on corpses died beside them. Faith cracked under the weight of panic. In moments like this, the gods felt less like protectors and more like distant spectators. The prayers continued, but the answers didn't. Some blamed Apollo, god of plague. Others accused Athena of betrayal. The wise said it was nature, not wrath. But the wise died too. The city changed, morality bent. When tomorrow isn't guaranteed, rules feel optional. People drank, stole, and laughed too loudly at funerals. Even priests whispered doubts. The old certainty that sacrifice brought safety was gone. The fire of the altars kept burning, but mostly for light. Eventually the plague faded, as all things do, leaving behind fewer people and more questions. Those who survived walked through a city of ashes and silence. They rebuilt because there was nothing else to do. Grief became routine, survival a civic duty. You walk among the ruins in your mind, the echo of sandals scraping stone, the scent of smoke still clinging to the air. The temples stand, though their paint has peeled. The marble statues stare forward with blank calm, as if they've seen this cycle 1,000 times. Humans build, worship, despair, rebuild. The gods watch, or they don't. It changes nothing. Even now, the rituals continue. At dusk, you see a farmer leading a goat toward a small shrine outside the city. The air is cool, the horizon painted gold. He stops, bows his head, and whispers something you can't hear. The knife glints once in the fading light. The sound that follows is brief and final. He leaves the offering on a stone slab and walks away without looking back. There's no joy in it, only habit, the rhythm of fear turned tradition. Religion here isn't about comfort, it's about rhythm. Life and death are measured by rituals, each one meant to keep chaos at bay. Maybe it works. The city keeps rising again. The people keep living, laughing and praying, even when the heavens are silent. The act itself becomes the meaning. You stand by the altar as the sky deepens from pink to blue. The smoke rises slowly, curling toward the stars that the ancients believed were the eyes of gods. Somewhere far away, thunder rolls over the sea. Maybe Zeus is listening, maybe he's laughing. Either way, the wind carries the scent of burnt offering out across the hills, mixing with the night, and that, you realize, is Athens at its truest, half devotion, half defiance. A city that keeps calling to the divine even when no one answers. It's not faith that keeps it alive, but the refusal to stop asking questions. As the last embers fade, the sound of hooves drifts through the dark. Far to the west, in colder lands, another people will soon call upon their gods, not for mercy, but for revenge. The path now carries us toward a new fire, one that will light the edge of the world. The smoke from Athens fades into mist. The heat of marble gives way to the chill of rain. The world shifts from olive groves to grey forests, from bright stone to wet mud. You stand now in a land of cold wind and iron resolve, Roman Britain, where order is written in Latin and enforced with a whip. The Romans call it a province. The Britons call it occupation. And somewhere between those two words stands a woman with hair the colour of fire and eyes that remember freedom. Her name is Boudica. You'll hear it softened into legend later, but here in the raw present, she's simply a queen with too much grief and too little patience. Her husband, Prasutagus, king of the Iceni tribe, has played the Roman game carefully. He's made treaties, paid taxes, even written a will naming both his daughters and the emperor's heirs. A political move meant to protect his people. It's diplomacy by optimism, and like most optimism under empire, it ends badly. When he dies, Rome ignores the will. The emperor's agents arrive not as guests, but as accountants with swords. They seize the lands, confiscate property, and claim the Iceni kingdom as imperial estate. The queen protests. Rome answers as Rome always does, with punishment designed to be remembered. Boudica is flogged in front of her people. Her daughters are assaulted. The Roman soldiers laugh as if cruelty were policy, and maybe it is. The crowd watches, stunned, the humiliation too vast to process. Somewhere in the distance, thunder breaks over the moors. A storm begins, both literal and not. The next days pass in a silence so dense it feels like waiting. The Romans assume they've restored order. They always assume that. Boudica moves among her people, gathering those whose loyalty has not yet been broken. The tribes meet in secret. The Trinovantes, the Iceni, others who still remember life before empire. They sit around fires, faces lit orange and gold, and speak of vengeance as if it were prayer. In the flicker of flame you see her rise, tall, fierce, and unbowed. Her voice cuts through the wind like iron through wool. She speaks not of rebellion but of restoration, of taking back what was stolen. The warriors listen, some nod, others tremble. The druids stand behind her, silent figures in white, robes, their chants a low rhythm that feels older than Rome itself. When she invokes the goddess Andraste, the war spirit of Britain, the night seems to lean closer. The flames bend in the wind, and every heart catches the same fire. The plan is simple in its madness. Strike first, strike hard, strike where Rome feels untouchable. You can almost hear the sound of iron being sharpened in the darkness. Spears, blades, courage. The men tie charms of bone and twig to their belts. The women braid their hair and prepare bandages. The druids whisper omens into the smoke. The wind carries the smell of peat and promise. At dawn, they march. The Roman towns are complacent. Colonies of villas and bathhouses, where officials believe rebellion has been tamed by comfort. The soldiers are far away. The legions stretch thin across the island. The first strike comes swift and merciless. Camulodunum, a Roman settlement, proud and smug, built on confiscated land. Its temple to Emperor Claudius gleams like an insult. The townspeople wake to the sound of horns, to fire devouring their streets. The rebels pour through the gates, a tide of fury in wool and iron. Statues fall, houses burn, and the air fills with the sound of Rome learning that control is a fragile myth. Boudica watches from her chariot, her daughters beside her. The reins are braided leather, the horses foaming, the wheels rimmed with blades. Her voice carries over the roar. This isn't conquest, it's repayment. Every torch thrown into a Roman villa is a message. You cannot own people and expect them to stay quiet forever. By nightfall, the city is ash. The temple collapses in on itself, the gods of Rome smothered under the weight of their own arrogance. Survivors flee toward Londinium, hoping for protection that will never come. Behind them, the fields glow red against the dark. The Romans will later call her savage. Historians will debate her motives. But standing here, amid the smoke and the cries, you understand something simpler. This is what happens when humiliation grows teeth. The rain begins again, washing the soot into the soil. The horses stamp, the men shout, the women gather the wounded. Boudica moves through them like a living flame, her voice calm, her gaze steady. She doesn't celebrate. She doesn't smile. The victory feels less like triumph and more like justice finally exhaled. Her army swells as word spreads. Tribes long divided by pride or fear now unite under her banner. Even the druids, secretive and proud, come out of their groves to bless the rebellion. The island breathes differently now, with defiance instead of submission. You stand at the edge of the battlefield, the air thick with the smell of wet ashes and iron. The sky is grey, the kind of grey that promises more storms. And you think of Rome, vast, organised, sure of itself, sitting miles away, unaware that its empire has just been insulted by someone it thought forgettable. History, in its arrogance, often forgets the moment before the roar, the stillness when the world is about to shift. You can feel that stillness now. The tribes wait, sharpening spears, cleaning blades, whispering the names of the dead. Somewhere, Boudica looks up at the storm clouds and sees not omen, but opportunity. Rome believes order is eternal. Boudica knows better. Empires fall the same way walls do, not all at once, but first by a single crack that everyone ignores. As we drift further into the story, the fires spread. The queen rides north toward Londinium, her chariot wheels cutting through the mud like prophecy. The wind howls across the moors, carrying with it the sound of rebellion, fierce, righteous, and inevitable. The storm doesn't stop. It simply changes shape. What began as grief and humiliation now burns as purpose. The rain hisses against embers, and the embers answer by glowing brighter. Across the grey hills of Britain the tribes gather. At first they come in small groups, families carrying spears, hunters with slings, farmers clutching sickles that still smell of wheat. Then they come in hundreds, then thousands. The forests empty into the open fields, a slow, relentless migration towards something larger than any of them. The air trembles with the noise of iron and decision. The Iceni are joined by the Trinovantes, the Cornovi, the Catuvelauni, names that once meant rival, now meaning ally. Every man and woman carries a reason: a brother crucified, a farm seized, a child sold into slavery. The Romans called it peace, the Britons call it theft written in marble. At the centre of it all stands Boudica. Her chariot is painted with the spiral patterns of her ancestors. Her horses snort steam into the cold air. Her daughters ride beside her, no longer victims but witnesses. Around her, the druids chant in low, steady tones, voices rising and falling like wind through stone. You hear drums made from stretched hide echo across the hills. The sound carries through mist and rain, the heartbeat of an island remembering itself. Smoke rises from campfires in every direction, thin grey lines curling into the clouds as if the earth itself were praying. The council gathers under a grove of ancient oaks. The night is long and heavy with rain. Torches flicker, shadows crawl across the bark like restless spirits. The chieftains sit in a circle, each bearing scars that speak for them. The druids stand behind, their white robes turning brown at the hem. Between them, on a flat stone, burns a single flame, small, stubborn, alive. One by one the tribes swear oaths. They bring gifts, blades, amulets, pieces of gold torn from Roman statues. They spill ale on the ground for the ancestors. A woman sings a song older than language, her voice low and trembling. It tells of a land betrayed, of gods who wait in silence for courage to return. The others join softly until the grove hums with sound, a river of sorrow flowing into strength. Boudica speaks last. She doesn't shout. Her voice is quiet but sharp, like the edge of a newly forged sword. She reminds them of the whips, the chains, the arrogance of empire. She tells them that the Romans believe they've conquered the world, but they've only conquered their own imagination. They think discipline is strength, she says, but so is anger when it finally learns to stand. The words travel through the crowd like fire through dry grass. You can feel it. The moment when fear turns into something heavier, steadier, almost holy. They're no longer survivors. They're a storm with a name. By morning the grove is empty. The tribes have scattered to prepare. Smiths hammer late into the night, shaping blades from scavenged Roman metal. The sparks fly upward, orange against the grey. Women grind herbs for wounds not yet made. Children gather stones for slings. The druids mark runes into the soil, symbols for luck and vengeance. The Romans, still unaware, write letters about taxes. They build roads and argue over promotions. Their empire moves forward like a machine, precise and deaf. The messages of revolt reach them too late, carried by terrified couriers who have seen villages disappear behind curtains of smoke. Somewhere near the coast, A trader watches the horizon and sees it glowing red. He doesn't stay to learn why. Back in the camps, rain mixes with ash. Warriors sharpen their spears on wet stones, humming under their breath. The rhythm of the sharpening becomes music, the anthem of inevitability. You catch fragments of prayer, to Andraste for victory, to the ancestors for courage, to the land itself for forgiveness. At dusk, the sky clears for the first time in weeks. The clouds split open to reveal a thin band of gold light, soft and brief. Boudica rides to the top of a hill, the wind twisting her hair like flame. Below her, thousands wait. An army without armour, a rebellion without maps. They watch her raise her spear, and for that instant even the wind seems to hold its breath. She tells them what they already know, that Rome has taken their homes, their gods, their dignity. That mercy is not coming, that the land remembers every boot print and every insult. We will give them back their silence, she says, the silence of ashes. The crowd answers with a roar that shakes the trees. You can feel it in your chest. Not rage, not madness, but release. Centuries of oppression collapsing into one deafening sound. Night falls, but the fires do not die. The camp becomes a constellation of orange light across the dark fields. From far away, it looks like the earth itself has begun to burn from the inside. The druids move through the ranks, whispering blessings, smearing ash on foreheads, marking warriors with sacred spirals. The horses snort and stamp, uneasy but resolute. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, the omen of battle. The wind smells of rain and iron and inevitability. Boudica stands by the fire, her reflection shimmering in the heat. Her daughters sleep beside her, wrapped in wolfskins. For a moment, she looks not like a queen or a warrior, but a mother preparing to gamble everything on a single dawn. History will remember her fury, her vengeance, her cruelty perhaps. But standing here, you understand the quieter truth. Rebellion is rarely about glory. It's about the unbearable weight of being human and refusing to bow under it any longer. As the last fire burns low, the wind carries the faint scent of wet earth and pine. The silence before battle feels like the deep inhale before a scream. Somewhere beyond the hills, a Roman garrison sleeps, dreaming of order. They have no idea that the world around them has already begun to change its mind. From here, the path leads straight into flame. The first city waits on the horizon, still sleeping under the illusion of peace. But peace, like empire, is only ever temporary. The first Roman city falls before anyone can even believe it's happening. Camulodunum, or Colchester, as it will one day be called, wakes to the sound of horns cutting through fog. The air is damp, cold, and strangely still, as if the sky itself is waiting to see what humanity will do next. The town has walls, but they're thin, decorative, not defensive. Rome thought this land pacified. The streets are lined with villas, workshops, and the new temple of Emperor Claudius, still smelling of plaster and pride. Statues of Roman gods look down with blank marble serenity, unaware that their worshippers are already running. At dawn, the mist parts to reveal the hills beyond, and there they are, the Britons, thousands of them, dark against the pale horizon, moving like a tide with spears instead of waves. The Roman sentries freeze, the trumpets sound too late, and the city realizes too suddenly that civilization is only ever rented, never owned. The first shouts turn into chaos. Women grab their children, men rush to barricade doors with furniture that won't hold. Priests run to the temple, clutching charms that have lost their power. The Roman veterans, proud of their discipline, form a line near the forum. They raise their shields, steady their spears, and wait for an order that never comes. The roar arrives before the rebels do. Drums, horns, the cry of vengeance echoing through stone streets. The Britons pour in, Wild but coordinated, their fury sharpened by grief. Smoke follows almost immediately. Roofs catch. Flames leap from thatch to timber. The heat grows so fast it bends the air. From her chariot, Boudica watches. The wheels cut through the mud, the horses' flanks dark with sweat. Her daughters stand beside her, their faces set, not in triumph, but in awe. The Romans once believed they ruled by divine favour. Now the favour seems to have changed its mind. The temple to Claudius becomes a fortress. Hundreds flee inside, priests, and soldiers barricading the doors with statues and benches. Outside, the Britons encircle the building like a tightening noose. Smoke stings the air, sparks drift upward like frightened stars. The rebels wait until the screams from within begin to sound like prayers. Then they set it alight. The marble cracks. The bronze doors warp. Statues melt into grotesque shapes, faces sliding off in silence. The roof collapses with a sound like thunder rolling across heaven. For one blinding moment, the fire lights up the entire valley, a pillar of orange and black against the grey sky. Rome's presence burns like parchment, and the world watches. By evening, Camulodunum is gone. Where houses stood, only glowing embers remain. The wind carries the smell of smoke and iron, of grain and blood and something older, the scent of a land reclaiming itself. Crows circle above, their wings dark against the fading light. The survivors who manage to flee stumble south toward Londinium, their faces pale with ash. They speak of demons, not people, of eyes bright with fury, of painted warriors rising from the mist like the dead come back for their debts. Rome listens, half in disbelief, half in fear. But the empire has always been good at underestimating what it doesn't understand. In the aftermath, silence spreads. The night is deep and red. The fields still glow faintly, dotted with smoking ruins. Boudica walks among them, the soles of her boots hissing on hot ground. She says nothing. The victory feels raw, too heavy to celebrate. This isn't triumph, it's reckoning. A balance sheet written in ash. She orders the burial of her own dead, the tending of the wounded, the gathering of supplies. The druids perform quiet rites among the ruins. They pour water on the scorched earth, whispering to the spirits of those who fell. Smoke curls upward, caught in the pale moonlight. The war has only begun, but the message is already clear. Rome is not invincible. You can almost hear the whispers carried by the wind, disbelief turning into legend. Somewhere, a Roman clerk will write about barbarians driven by madness. Somewhere else, a Briton mother will tell her child that the gods finally answered. Both will be wrong, and both will be right. In history books yet unwritten, this moment will shrink to a paragraph. But standing here, you can feel its scale. The ground is still warm. The trees near the edge of the town are charred, their bark splitting like old wounds. A lone Roman helmet lies in the mud, reflecting the flicker of a dying fire. Civilization, it turns out, is surprisingly flammable. The rebels move on before dawn. There's no time to rest. The Romans will regroup. The legions will march. Boudica knows it. Every mile south is a race against the Empire's inevitable response. The air smells of smoke and rain. The horses leave black streaks through the wet earth. Behind them, the ruins fade into fog once more. Where there was a city now, there is only memory, and even that is starting to dissolve. The crows settle on what's left of the temple, picking at the stones, as if searching for answers Rome never found. By midday, the rebellion reaches the edge of the Thames. Ahead lies Londinium, young, wealthy, and completely unprepared. Traders shout, ships unload goods, officials argue about taxes. News of Camulodunum's fall arrives too late. A rumour dismissed until the smoke on the horizon proves it true. The Roman governor, Suetonius, is far away with the legions. the city's defence rests in the hands of merchants and veterans. They weigh their choices, flee and live, or stay and make history's shortest stand. Most choose survival. The rest never have time to regret it. You stand with the wind in your face, smelling the sea and the smoke mingling together. Salt and soot, two halves of the same storm. Somewhere behind you, Boudica raises her hand. Thousands wait for the signal. It comes, silent but absolute. The fire that began in one city is about to consume another. If we follow the trail a little further, the smoke will grow thicker, the screams louder, and the world redder. Londinium will soon learn what it means to build empire on borrowed ground. And Rome, somewhere across the sea, will finally start to wonder if perhaps even an empire can tremble. The fire doesn't fade. It learns how to travel. The smoke from Camulodunum drifts east, curling through the lowlands, tracing its way along the Roman roads like a dark messenger. By the time it reaches Londinium, the city is already trembling under rumours. The people whisper that the Iceni queen rides with an army so vast it fills the horizon, that the gods of Britain have returned with her, that even the rivers are rising against Rome. No one knows what's true, but everyone feels the wind shift. It smells of ash. Londinium, young and ambitious, was built by merchants who thought trade was stronger than rebellion. Warehouses line the Thames, packed with amphorae of wine and grain, silk from the east, copper from the mines. Its streets are straight and smug, its walls not yet finished. The Roman governor Suetonius is still marching back from Wales, unaware that time has already run out. At dawn, the first refugees arrive. Farmers with soot on their faces, soldiers without armour, their stories stuttering out between breaths. They say the rebels burn everything, that no mercy is asked or given. The city's merchants gather in the forum, shouting, calculating. Some want to fight. Most want to leave. When word comes that the legions are days away, the choice is made. Flee south and survive. When Boudica's army crests the hill, they find a city already half empty. But fire doesn't care about attendance. The Britons sweep through like a storm breaking its promise to stay small. The thatched roofs go first, then the timber frames, then everything else that ever pretended permanence. The flames leap from street to street, consuming shops, homes and shrines alike. The Thames turns black with soot. From her chariot, Boudica watches, expression unreadable. Her hair whips in the wind like another banner of flame. Behind her, the Druids chant. The sky darkens, not with clouds, but with smoke so thick it blots out the sun. The sound is constant, wood snapping, hooves pounding, the screams of horses trying to breathe. Far away in Rome, the message arrives weeks later. A city burned. 2 more threatened. Tens of thousands dead. The Senate gathers under marble ceilings, and someone finally dares to say it aloud. A woman leads them. The Emperor Nero, barely past his youth, sits listening in silence. His advisors argue, punish them, negotiate, ignore. Nero hesitates, caught between fear and vanity. The empire has no policy for embarrassment. Back in Britain, the rebellion moves north. Verulamium, what you'd call St. Albans now, stands next. Its forum gleams with Roman order, its markets hum with trade. The people have heard the rumours but hope the fire will pass them by. It doesn't. By nightfall, the city joins the others in ruin. Archaeologists, centuries later, will find the evidence still there. A layer of red, half a metre thick, where everything that once stood has been reduced to dust. Beneath modern London, they'll find the same scar, a thin sheet of ash and glass fused together by impossible heat. History remembers through what refuses to rot. The rebellion's reach astonishes even its own leaders. Rome's power, so absolute in theory, crumbles under the weight of distance and pride. The legions retreat, regroup, argue among themselves. Messages vanish in rain-soaked forests. The governor Suetonius finally arrives to find nothing left to defend. The map of Britain looks like a field of burned parchment. The rebellion pauses not because it must, but because exhaustion is the only thing left unburned. Tens of thousands of Britons rest amid their own victories. The nights are colder now. The air smells of iron and smoke. The ground, when you walk on it, crunches softly underfoot, a carpet of ash and bone. You stand among the ruins of Londinium, the sky a dull grey lid above the horizon. Every breath tastes faintly of metal. Charred timbers jut from the earth like blackened ribs. The silence is uncanny. Not peace, but aftermath. Somewhere in the distance a horse screams once and then goes quiet. Boudica rides through the ruins. The wind lifts her hair. Her cloak drags against the cinders. She says nothing. The druids follow at a distance, faces hidden in hoods, murmuring prayers that sound like apologies. The queen stops near the river, where the flames still smoulder. She looks at the blackened skyline, a city erased, and for a heartbeat she almost looks tired. The rebellion has done what it set out to do, humiliate an empire that spans continents. Word of her victories crosses the sea faster, and the Roman ships can follow. In taverns and markets from Gaul to Rome, people whisper her name as if it were a spell, a barbarian queen who made emperors afraid of maps. Even her enemies feel it, the strange awe reserved for those who refuse to kneel. When you terrify an empire, the storytellers will say, you've earned your statue. And she does, though the statue will come centuries later, standing bronze and proud near the Thames, her chariot frozen in eternal motion. The city she burned will one day rebuild and name her a legend. History has a short memory for fear, but a long affection for spectacle. For now, though, there are no statues, only smoke. The army gathers again, preparing for one final strike, a reckoning between chaos and order, between fury and strategy. Rome has chosen its battlefield. Suetonius waits at a narrow pass, the hills rising on either side like jaws. His legions dig in, shields gleaming like a wall of dull gold. The rebels march toward them, drums echoing through the valley. Boudica rides at the front, her daughters beside her, their faces streaked with war paint. The wind pulls at their hair. Behind them, the army stretches for miles, a living tide of vengeance, their banners ragged, their hearts burning brighter than any torch. The sky turns the colour of iron. The horses snort and paw at the ground, uneasy. Even the druids fall silent. It feels like the whole world is holding its breath, waiting to see what will happen when faith meets formation. From here, the smoke begins to thin, replaced by the taste of dust and fear. The rebellion has burned its brightest. Now it stands at the edge of its own shadow. You can almost hear the silence forming before the clash, the pause before thunder. The air before battle always feels wrong, too still, too heavy, as if even the birds have decided to hide. The sun hangs low over the grey hills of Watling Street, a pale coin in a colourless sky. The Romans wait in formation, tight, disciplined, quiet. The Britons wait opposite, restless, vast, and alive. Between them lies a field that will soon forget which side was right. Suetonius, the Roman governor, has chosen his ground carefully. A narrow valley, hemmed by woods on both sides. His men can't be flanked. The legions dig trenches, sharpen stakes, and line up their wagons in a half-circle behind them. A machine made of order and fear. They stand in ranks, shields raised, their red banners hanging still in the wind. Across the field, Boudica surveys her army. Tens of thousands of Britons gathered from every tribe she could reach. They've brought their families, their carts, their world with them. The wagons form a vast ring behind the soldiers, filled with food, children, and the wounded. A moving village following its destiny. Smoke from their campfires drifts lazily across the plain, smelling of ash, sweat, and wild herbs. Boudica stands in her chariot, horses pawing the damp ground. Her daughters stand beside her, their faces painted with blue spirals, marks of protection or defiance, or both. The queen raises her spear and the murmuring stops. The sound of the wind fills the silence. She speaks, though her words are carried more by rhythm than by volume. She reminds them of what was taken, their homes, their freedom, their pride. She points toward the Roman lines, the wall of metal glinting under the weak sun. They have order, she says, but no heart. They fight for wages. We fight for the world itself. Her voice carries over the field, and the tribes answer with a roar that seems to shake the trees. The druids behind her lift their arms, chanting to the goddess Andraste, their white robes whipping in the wind. It feels like the earth itself is listening. The Romans do not move. Their silence is heavier than any chant. Each soldier grips his shield, eyes fixed ahead. They've seen rebellion before, but never like this. Never so vast, never led by a woman who has turned loss into momentum. Then, without command, the Britons charge. The field erupts in motion, a surge of bodies, shouts and hooves. Spears rise and fall like waves. The drums beat so hard the earth seems to echo. The sound swallows everything else. The breath, the heartbeat, the thought. Suetonius waits until the rebels are close enough to see the whites of Roman eyes. Then, at a single command, the legion moves as one. Shields lift, javelins fly. The air fills with the hiss of metal. The front line of Britain stumbles, then falls. The Romans draw swords and advance in perfect rhythm, pushing forward, unbroken, every motion trained and precise. The rebellion hits the wall of shields and shatters against it. Courage meets geometry. For all their numbers, the Britons cannot break the pattern. The narrow valley works against them. They cannot surround the Romans. Behind them, the wagons trap their own retreat. The chaos they once wielded as strength now turns into confusion. You can almost see the dust rising, thick, red-tinged, swallowing the sky. The screams merge into one long, shapeless sound. The Romans press forward, the formation tightening, a slow, relentless grind. For every step they take, another life falls. The Britons fight fiercely, but the tide is turning and the tide does not care who it carries. Boudica rides through the smoke, calling her people back to order. Her voice cuts through the noise, steady, commanding. But the field has lost its rhythm. Fear has found its way in. Her chariot wheels slice through mud and blood, the horses foaming, the reins slick in her hands. She finds her daughters still fighting, still shouting defiance even as the line collapses around them. When the last formation breaks, the Romans move like clockwork. The valley becomes a trap. The wagons behind the Britons block escape. The killing stops only when there's no one left to fight. Silence returns. Suddenly, as if the earth exhales, the battle is over. The Romans stand among the fallen, their faces unreadable. The valley smells of iron and rain. The wind picks up, carrying the faint cry of crows circling overhead. It is the kind of silence that only follows thunder. Vast, empty, and impossible to fill. Boudica disappears from history here. Some say she drank poison rather than be captured. Some say she fell ill and died in her sleep. Others say she vanished into the forests, her chariot rolling forever through the mist. The truth is uncertain, but the myth is louder than fact. For centuries, her name will echo through the island's memory, not as failure, but as refusal. Rome reclaims its order. The legions rebuild the roads, punish the survivors, and write reports explaining how victory was inevitable. Suetonius receives praise, Nero pretends confidence, and the empire moves on. But beneath the soil, the story doesn't sleep. The ashes of cities, the bones of the fallen, the whispers of the tribes, they all linger, waiting for the next wind to stir them. Standing on that field now, the heather swaying in slow rhythm, You can almost hear her voice in the distance, not shouting, not angry, just present. A murmur in the grass, a reminder that defiance never fully dies. The Romans left their walls and statues. She left a silence that still breathes. History, generous as always, will make her into a symbol, a queen, a martyr, a myth. But behind all that legend is something simpler. A mother who saw her daughters wronged, and a world unwilling to help. She fought because she could not stand still. Empires write laws, grief writes revolutions. The wind moves through the heather, whispering in patterns only the land can read. You can almost believe the earth remembers her, not as fire, not as fury, but as motion that never quite stopped. As the last light fades from the hills, you realize the story of power always ends the same way, with quiet. The swords are gone, the banners fall, the air clears. All that remains is the question of what endures. From here the path softens. The smoke of war gives way to the scent of herbs and incense. Steel gives way to hands that heal instead of harm. They fought with weapons, others fought with balance. The world moves from thunder to breath. The battlefield fades. The smell of iron gives way to something softer. The faint smoke of incense, the quiet crackle of fire, the slow rhythm of breath. You've crossed from the world of war to the world of healing, where the greatest battle is fought not against enemies, but against the body itself. In the ancient world, illness isn't random. It's a message from gods, from nature, from something you've done wrong this week. Health, people believe, is harmony. To be sick is to fall out of tune with the universe. And so, the healer's work is not just to cure the body, but to coax it back into balance with everything else. You sit beside a low altar in a dim room filled with the scent of resin and herbs. Clay jars line the walls, each labelled in symbols you can't read but can smell from here. Myrrh, honey, garlic, smoke. A priest healer moves quietly through the space, his robe brushing the floor. He mutters something to himself, a prayer, or maybe an observation about your colour. His hand traces small circles in the air as if he's rearranging the invisible forces that keep you alive. In Mesopotamia, the world between the Tigris and Euphrates, illness is never just physical. It's personal. Maybe you offended a god by stepping on sacred ground, or forgot to leave food at the temple, or muttered something rude near a statue. The healer doesn't just prescribe herbs, he negotiates with the divine. The process begins with a question. What have you done to upset the gods this week? The answer is often, I'm not sure, which leads to a ritual involving fire, oil, and a great deal of chanting. Clay tablets record the procedures in careful detail. One line reads, if a man's head burns with fever, recite this incantation 3 times while rubbing his feet with cedar oil. Another suggests using beer as a disinfectant, proving that even in antiquity, people believed alcohol could solve at least some of life's problems. The Mesopotamian doctor is part scientist, part priest, part therapist. His tools include plants, minerals, prayers, and an alarming level of confidence. When in doubt, he consults the stars. The alignment of Venus or Mars might determine whether your cough is divine annoyance or just the weather. In either case, garlic usually enters the conversation. Travel west, and Egypt greets you with sunlight and order. Here, medicine is sacred mathematics. The body mirrors the Nile. Channels flow through it, nourishing every part. When one is blocked, sickness follows. To heal is to make the river run again. Doctors, called estudiantes, study scrolls filled with recipes, treatments, and hymns, not just science, but structure. The oldest medical text we know, the Ebers Papyrus, reads like a cross between a pharmacy and a poem. It lists hundreds of remedies, from honey for wounds to mouldy bread for infection. It turns out ancient intuition sometimes stumbled upon penicillin long before the word existed. The Egyptian healer doesn't separate the physical from the spiritual. Illness has layers. You treat the body with herbs, the spirit with prayer, and the mind with ritual. Each treatment begins with an offering, a few drops of oil, a whispered word to the lion-headed goddess Sekhmet, who governs both plague and protection. To heal someone, you must first convince her that you're not trying to steal her job. The room smells of lotus and copper. Candles flicker against walls painted with images of gods holding knives that double as scalpels. A priest dips a reed pen into ink and writes charms onto papyrus strips, then wraps them around the patient's wrist. Nearby, another healer grinds ingredients in a shallow bowl, honey, mint, powdered stone, creating a paste that smells faintly of sweetness and sand. You begin to see a pattern. Every civilization starts from the same question: why do we suffer? And every civilization answers it with its own form of comfort. For some, it's penance. For others, precision. But always, it's human. A refusal to accept pain as meaningless. To be sick in this age is to become part of a story. Your fever isn't random, it's a message. Your healer doesn't just check your pulse, he interprets your destiny. He tells you to fast, to pray, to drink bitter water mixed with crushed roots. You obey because faith is sometimes the strongest medicine of all. The fire pops softly in the brazier beside you. Smoke coils upward, tracing invisible shapes. The healer sits beside you, his expression calm. He places a hand on your forehead, murmurs a few words you don't recognize, and then offers you a drink that smells of cloves and regret. You take it anyway. The bitterness spreads across your tongue, grounding you in the moment. Somewhere outside, the city hums, donkeys braying, wheels creaking, the river breathing against its banks. The healer looks up at the sound and nods. As long as the world keeps moving, he says, so will you. You're not sure if it's philosophy or placebo, but either way you feel slightly better. In this world, medicine isn't about fighting nature, it's about cooperating with it. You don't conquer illness, you bargain with it. You offer the gods what they want, a prayer, a meal, a goat if you're unlucky, and hope they return the favour with a pulse that steadies. There's something strangely comforting about it. Illness becomes dialogue. Pain becomes information. The body is not your enemy, but a messenger. It whispers, sometimes loudly, sometimes cruelly, but always honestly. As the night deepens, the healer extinguishes the lamp and opens the door. The air outside is cool and filled with the scent of burning herbs. The stars glitter above the river like scattered embers. You breathe in, slow and deep, feeling the warmth of the potion settle into your stomach. Health, you realize, isn't perfection. It's balance. The narrow space between too much and too little. The ancients didn't have microscopes, but they understood this much. Harmony is fragile, and life is the art of maintaining it for one more day. From here, the path carries you east, where another river waits, winding through sands and stone. There, healers will mix prayer with precision, turning illness into architecture and anatomy into divinity. The fire that once destroyed empires now burns softly in oil lamps, lighting the quiet science of survival. The Nile moves like breath, slow, deliberate, and endless. Along its banks, the air smells of wet clay and papyrus. Life here is geometry disguised as grace, every sunrise measured, every heartbeat tied to the rhythm of the river. And in this rhythm, Egypt discovered its own language of healing, where medicine and magic never argued because they were quite simply the same thing. To the Egyptians, illness was not chaos, it was imbalance. The body was a temple of channels and tides, a miniature version of the world itself. When you fell ill, something in that inner Nile had stopped flowing. The task of the healer was not to conquer disease, but to reopen the paths where life had slowed. You sit in a quiet chamber lit by oil lamps. The walls are covered with painted gods, falcons, lions, serpents, all watching with calm disinterest. A scribe kneels nearby, copying symbols onto papyrus with ink made from soot and water. Each line curves like a pulse. You can hear the gentle rasp of reed on paper, a sound older than most alphabets. The healer enters. He's not what you might imagine. No white robes or solemn masks, just linen, sand-coloured, simple. Around his neck hangs a small amulet of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of both healing and plague. To her followers, she was proof that creation and destruction were merely two sides of the same pulse. You call on her gently, or not at all. He begins not with medicine, but with math, measuring your pulse with his fingers, counting the breaths between heartbeats. The body is a rhythm, he says softly, and rhythm must be restored. He doesn't ask what you ate or where it hurts. He asks what you've been dreaming. On a table beside him sits a collection of copper instruments, knives, hooks, and spoons polished to mirror brightness. They catch the lamplight, flickering like small suns. Some are for surgery, some are for ceremony. The difference here is mostly administrative. The same hand that makes an incision can also bless the wound. He prepares a mixture for you. Honey, willow bark, and crushed herbs. It smells faintly sweet, faintly alive. Honey is Egypt's favourite cure. It seals wounds, draws out infection, and pleases the gods with its purity. Mouldy bread, surprisingly, is another remedy, an early flirtation with penicillin discovered through sheer persistence. You wonder who was the first to look at spoiled bread and think, this seems medicinal. But then, survival often begins with curiosity mistaken for bravery. The healer grinds the ingredients together in a small stone bowl, humming a slow prayer. The sound vibrates through the room like a heartbeat turned into music. He dips his fingers into the mixture and traces a line across your forehead. The touch is cool and deliberate. Behind him, the scribe continues to write. The papyrus beside him is a page from the Ebers Papyrus, the great scroll of medicine, copied and recopied for centuries. It lists hundreds of treatments in a tone of serene confidence. For burns, honey and milk. For stomach pain, figs boiled in beer. For ghosts of the dead lingering near your bed. A charm written in red ink and worn close to the skin. There is no separation between science and superstition, because both work through faith, one in the gods, one in patterns. The Egyptian healer trusts both equally. When he cuts with copper, he murmurs to Thoth, God of knowledge. When he closes a wound, he offers thanks to Isis, who knew how to reassemble even a broken god. Each act of medicine is a quiet conversation with divinity. You step outside into the evening air. The sun is melting into gold behind the palms, and the river glows like molten glass. A fisherman nearby hums the same tune the healer used while grinding herbs. You realise that healing here isn't confined to temples. It happens in rhythm. The rhythm of oars, of chanting, of the Nile breathing through every lung in the kingdom. In the distance, you see the shadow of a pyramid against the horizon. Inside it, priests tend to the bodies of the dead with the same care they give the living. The art of preservation, they say, is simply medicine for a longer journey. They remove organs with copper blades, dry them in salt, wrap them in linen soaked in oils and prayers. Even death, in Egypt, is a process of balance. You walk through a marketplace later, where jars of remedies gleam in the lamplight. Merchants call out their cures, dried dates for digestion, frankincense for lungs, crocodile dung for reasons best left unexplored. Somewhere a mother buys honey to rub on her child's gums. A priest sells amulets shaped like eyes, each promising protection from unseen illness. The city hums with the quiet faith that everything can be mended if only you find the right word, the right herb, the right offering. Medicine here is a public performance of belief. The temples of healing, called houses of life, serve as both libraries and hospitals, Students copy old scrolls by day and assist surgeries by night. In one corner, a doctor measures pulse rates by counting sand falling through his fingers. In another, a priest writes a charm on linen to bind around a patient's chest. Between them, the sacred and the practical overlap like light on water. By the river, a young healer tends to an injured worker. The man's leg is wrapped in linen, darkened with herbs. The healer hums under his breath, dipping his hands in cool water, then pressing them to the wound. Sekhmet takes fever, he whispers, but leaves strength. The patient nods, eyes closed, breathing slowly. Around them the reeds sway and the insects sing. The scene feels eternal. The night deepens, the stars appear, each one, to the Egyptians, a sign that the gods are still watching. The air cools, carrying the faint scent of lotus and copper. You think of all the hands that have repeated these same gestures for thousands of years, lighting lamps, grinding herbs, whispering to the divine in the language of anatomy. Somewhere far beyond the desert, other civilizations are asking the same question, about balance, about the nature of life, about the strange connection between breath and meaning. Soon, in India and China, they will find their own rhythms of healing, not through gods, but through harmony itself. As you watch the last flicker of flame die on the altar, you realize that medicine, like faith, always begins in the dark, with someone kneeling beside a stranger, trying to turn suffering back into song. The candlelight dances once, then steadies. The hum of prayer fades into the sound of the river, and from here the current carries you east, toward new voices, new herbs, and new ideas about what it means to be whole. The river fades, but the rhythm remains. The sound of water turns into the sound of rain, soft and steady, falling through leaves half a world away. You're now in the east, where medicine no longer pleads with gods but listens to nature instead, to pulse, to breath, to the quiet conversation between the body and the world it lives in. Here, illness is not a curse, it's a misalignment, like a musical note played slightly off key. The goal isn't punishment or miracle, but harmony. The body, the mind, and the air around you must move together, each adjusting to the other, like the strings of a harp that only sound right when tuned in relation. In India, healers call this rhythm Ayurveda, the knowledge of life. It's part philosophy, part kitchen wisdom, part cosmic patience. Every person is made of three inner forces, called doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha. They aren't chemicals or elements. They're moods of the universe, movement, fire, and stillness. When they dance well together, you feel whole. When one oversteps, you catch a fever, or a headache, or a bad decision. An Ayurvedic healer's tools are deceptively simple. Herbs, oil, and observation. You sit cross-legged on a mat as she takes your wrist gently between her fingers. She doesn't check your pulse as a number, but as music. Each beat tells her something. Too fast means fire, too slow means earth, irregular means wind. She listens for a long time, eyes closed, as if reading a poem written beneath your skin. Afterwards, she smiles softly and prescribes balance disguised as daily life. Eat more cooling foods if your fire is high. Cucumber, yogurt, shade. If your body feels too still, move until you sweat. If your mind is restless, breathe until it isn't. She might add a teaspoon of turmeric, a handful of neem leaves, a long nap, and a reminder that wisdom often sounds like common sense whispered slowly. In the small courtyards of India, healing smells like spice and smoke. Someone boils ginger in milk to ease a cough. Another stirs ghee into warm rice for strength. The air hums with the clinking of copper cups, the hiss of steam, the slow rhythm of hands grinding herbs in stone mortars. Everything is practical, intimate, unhurried. You heal not in a hospital but at the heart of a household. Travel further east and the language of balance changes again. this time into the language of breath. In China, the universe is not made of matter but of motion. Everything is qi, the invisible current of energy that flows through the world and through you. You're not separate from the forest, the wind, or the stars. You're simply another pattern in their rhythm. When that pattern stumbles, you fall ill. The Chinese healer is a listener too, though in a different register. He studies your tongue, your skin, your pulse. He asks not only what hurts, but when it hurts. Morning or night, after food or before anger. He sees the body as a map drawn in opposites. Heat and cold, dryness and moisture, rest and movement. Each symptom is an argument between these forces. The cure is a negotiation. He prepares a tea for you, bitter and earthy, made from roots that look suspiciously like they've been dug up by philosophers. You drink it slowly because it demands patience. He sets needles into your skin, thin as hair, each one placed like a punctuation mark in a sentence your body forgot how to finish. The sting is sharp but fleeting. A warmth follows, faint, then real, then comforting. He calls it acupuncture. You call it something between science and serenity. Outside, the air smells of rain on stone and smoke from 1,000 small fires. Somewhere, someone practices Tai Chi, each motion flowing into the next like wind through silk. The entire culture seems built on the idea that movement itself is medicine. You keep energy from stagnating by letting it move. In the body and breath, in thought. In the far north, among the forests and steppes, you find a different kind of healer, one who works not with herbs or theory but with spirit. The shaman's world is one where illness may mean that your soul has wandered too far. To heal you, they sing. Their voice moves through the dark like smoke, rising and falling in patterns older than language. They drum softly, calling your lost self back home. Sometimes they burn sage, sometimes cedar, sometimes simply memory. It's not superstition. It's comfort shaped into ritual. Across all these lands, one truth repeats itself. The healer is not a warrior, but a translator. Pain speaks in its own dialect. The healer just happens to understand. Whether through pulse, breath, or melody, they turn fear into comprehension. They remind you that being alive is less about perfection and more about participation. You lie on a mat somewhere between incense and breeze. The air tastes faintly of mint and smoke. You can feel your pulse slowing, your breath deepening. Around you, the world hums, frogs calling from a nearby stream, rain whispering through leaves, someone chanting softly in a language you'll never learn but somehow understand. The healer hands you a small cup. The liquid inside is dark, bitter, and strangely grounding. You drink it, and for a moment, you feel the weight of centuries condensed into warmth. It's not a miracle, it's a conversation. Your body answers with gratitude. Outside, the rain stops. The clouds part, letting in a soft, colourless light. The healer watches you quietly, then nods. Balance, she says, is not stillness. It's movement that knows where to return. You walk away lighter, though you can't say why. Perhaps it's the tea, or the needles, or the fact that someone took the time to see you as more than a symptom. Healing, it seems, is as much about attention as it is about medicine. As the road winds west again, you carry the scent of herbs on your clothes and the echo of chanting in your mind. The air grows cooler, quieter. Somewhere across the sea another voice waits, a woman with a lyre, singing of love and longing in words that have outlived their world. The age of healers gives way to the age of poets, and through her voice you'll find another kind of medicine, one for the heart. The smell of herbs fades, replaced by salt and wind. The sound of rain turns into the hush of waves rolling over smooth stones. You are now on an island in the Aegean, Lesbos, where the sea is calm enough to think and the air itself seems to remember music. The hills are green with olive trees, their silver leaves whispering in the sunlight, and somewhere among them, a woman once sang words that refused to die. Her name is Sappho. To later generations, she will be called many things: the 10th Muse, the first lyric poet, a mystery, a scandal, a voice that somehow still lingers between languages. But in her own time, she was simply a teacher, a noble woman who gathered students, composed songs, and made the small act of writing about love into an act of quiet revolution. It's evening. You walk through the city of Mytilene. Oil lamps flicker in doorways, lyres hum faintly from courtyards. Somewhere laughter echoes, soft, unhurried, touched by wine. The air smells of rosemary, honey and sea salt. From a villa on the hill you hear singing, not the loud chanting of priests or the formal hymns to gods, but something smaller, warmer, made for human ears. Inside, Sappho's circle is gathered. It's a group of women, students, friends, companions, all sitting on woven mats in the amber glow of lamplight. A few hold lyres. One plucks a rhythm like a heartbeat. Another sprinkles rose petals into a bowl of water to scent the air. It's not a ritual, though it feels sacred. They are learning the art of language, how to speak beauty out loud without apology. Sappho sits near the window. Her hair is pinned back, her eyes calm but alive. She listens as one of her students recites a verse, then gently corrects a single word, changing its weight, its colour, its temperature. Words for her are not tools but threads. You weave them carefully or the pattern falls apart. Her poetry is different from anything the Greeks have heard before. Homer sang of war and heroes, Sappho sings of small things that outlast both. The warmth of a glance, the sting of absence, the way light touches skin. She writes in the first person, which feels radical in a culture that prefers its poets anonymous and its women silent. Each line begins with I, each ends with something you can still feel centuries later. I loved you once, she writes, and perhaps I love you still. Simple words, immortal ones. Her songs are not written for fame but for presence. They are performed with lyres, not scrolls, meant to be breathed, not studied. You imagine her singing softly, her voice carrying through the open window, out into the night where the sea waits to echo it. The wind shifts, and you can smell the ocean more clearly now, sharp, clean, infinite. Sappho's students listen, rapt. They live in a world where women rarely own their stories, yet here they are composing them together. It's the first writer's workshop in history where, with better clothing, warmer lighting and fewer men, when the lesson ends, they linger, sharing figs and laughter. Outside, the moon has risen, painting the walls pale silver. A student hums one of Sappho's melodies under her breath, half memory, half prayer. The tune drifts down the hillside toward the harbour, joining the sound of water against wood. Sappho watches from the window, quiet now. Her life, like her poetry, is full of contradictions. She is celebrated and censored, honoured and mocked. Her name will travel through centuries, collecting both admiration and misunderstanding, like seaweed on a tide. Some will call her divine, others will call her dangerous. Both will be right. She writes of women, of desire, of longing that defies boundaries. Her language doesn't shout, it whispers, and the world isn't sure how to handle that. In Athens, men quote her with reverence, but erase her name from public recitations. In later centuries, her work will vanish almost entirely, destroyed by time and Puritans, preserved only in fragments pressed between layers of papyrus. The loss will be immeasurable, like tearing pages from the soul of humanity and pretending the book is still whole. But for now, in this moment, she is here, alive, breathing, laughing. You can see her lift her lyre, pluck a single note, and begin to sing again. The sound is low and steady, rising and falling like waves against stone. Her voice carries that rare kind of calm that makes you forget the difference between joy and sorrow. Outside, the world keeps moving. The fishermen haul nets ashore. The goats bleat from the hills. The stars slide silently across the black sea. Yet inside this small circle of lamplight, time pauses. Each word seems to hang in the air, glowing slightly before dissolving back into silence. The song ends, and for a heartbeat no one speaks. Then the students applaud softly, as if afraid to disturb what's just been made. Sappho smiles. Small, almost private, and begins another verse, this one for the goddess Aphrodite, patron of both love and irony. You who bend hearts like wind bends grass, she sings, be gentle with me. It's a plea, but also a statement. To love is to surrender a little, but to sing about love, that's defiance wrapped in beauty. Later, when everyone has gone home and the lamps are out, Sappho stands by the open window. The night air cools her skin. She looks at the sea, hears the distant hum of ships, and perhaps wonders whether her words will survive the voyage of time. They will, just barely. Centuries will pass. Wars will erase libraries, priests will burn scrolls, languages will die. But fragments of her poems will surface. A line quoted in another text, a scrap of papyrus pulled from the sands of Egypt, a single word that refuses to translate but insists on being felt. Her voice, though broken, will endure, not because of fame, but because truth never decays completely. As dawn touches the horizon, the waves shimmer like lines of unwritten verse. You can almost hear her still, soft, steady, half asleep, half divine. From here, the story opens into memory, to the way words survive their writers, to the quiet defiance of creation itself. The next morning's sun will rise on a world already trying to forget her, but her song, like breath, keeps finding its way back. Morning light spills across the Aegean. The air smells of salt and olive trees, the sound of waves a soft metronome against the shore. Time has moved on, though the island hasn't noticed. The same hills still lean toward the sea, the same wind still whispers through them, but Sappho is gone, her song scattered like petals on the tide. Only fragments remain, a line carved into memory, a verse quoted in a scholar's note, a few papyrus scraps found centuries later, their edges crumbling, their ink faded to brown whispers. Yet even in pieces her words breathe. You read one aloud, and it feels less like reciting poetry and more like eavesdropping on eternity. Her voice is quiet but certain. It does not ask to be believed, only to be heard. Someone, she once wrote, will remember us. And someone did. The irony is that history tried very hard not to. The centuries between her and you are a long rehearsal in forgetting. The scrolls that held her complete works vanish, likely burned in the Library of Alexandria or worn to dust by neglect. Later, Christian scholars find her language too intimate, too human. They praise Homer for his heroes but whisper about Sappho as if emotion were a crime. Her name is erased from syllabi, her verses replaced with moral commentary. For 1,000 years, she exists only as rumour, a shadow beneath the footnotes of men. But words are stubborn things. A monk in Byzantium copies a fragment for its rhythm. A Roman historian quotes her for its wit. A papyrus buried in Egyptian sand keeps a few lines safe under centuries of silence, and one by one the pieces return, fragile, incomplete, luminous. Scholars in the modern world will reconstruct her like archaeologists piecing together a dream. They'll find her handwriting in layers of forgotten manuscripts, her phrases hidden inside receipts, her rhythms hiding inside prayers. Technology will help. Fragments that once looked blank will reveal ink when viewed in ultraviolet light. Even in ruin, her voice refuses extinction. She sang of love, but not the kind that fits easily into categories: desire, jealousy, beauty, despair. All appear in her verses as if emotions themselves were sacred creatures worth observing without judgment. "You may forget me," she wrote, "but I will remind you of love." And she has. Her name, misunderstood, will become language itself, sapphic, lesbian. Words born not from rumour but from resilience. History tried to delete her. The dictionary didn't. You imagine her now, not as a ghost but as an echo that still shapes the air. The cadence of her poetry lives in modern songs, her tenderness in every letter someone writes in secret. Her courage in speaking honestly about the inner life of women will ripple outward for millennia. Writers, painters, lovers, all will borrow her rhythm knowingly or not. The ocean outside still looks the same as it did when she watched it. The waves roll in, slow and steady, carving the same patterns into the sand. They erase, but they also rewrite. It's a kind of mercy. The world forgets everything eventually, but not completely. What matters leaves a trace, and sometimes that trace hums with more life than what survived whole. You pick up one of the surviving fragments, a few words on a brittle page. The letters lean softly, curved like reeds in wind. To love, it reads, is to tremble. You read it again and realise how much is contained in that single breath. Longing, fear, surrender, the entire history of being human condensed into one exhale. It's strange to think that her life once fit between sunrise and sunset, just like anyone else's. She ate bread, tied her hair, argued with students about rhythm. She probably worried about dinner more often than destiny. Yet somehow, the small act of noticing the world, of writing it down gently enough, made her immortal. You walk down to the shore where the sea brushes against the stones. The water glitters in morning light. Somewhere beneath it, pieces of ancient amphorae lie buried, the ghosts of everyday life. The waves murmur like a low chorus, and for a moment you understand what she meant when she said poetry was breath made visible. It's easy to imagine her voice blending with the sound of the surf, that same calm rhythm, measured and alive. Not a lament but an acknowledgement. That love ends, that life changes, that beauty never asks permission to vanish. Yet through it all, there's a kind of joy, quiet, steady, defiant. Sappho's story doesn't end in loss, it ends in persistence, the kind that doesn't shout but endures anyway. Every time someone writes about love honestly, she returns. Every time someone finds beauty in imperfection, she hums softly in the background. She has outlasted empires without ever leaving her island. You close your eyes and listen. The sea wind moves through the olive branches, the same sound she must have heard when composing her verses. The world hums around you, water, air, pulse, memory, and it all feels connected. Balance again, but of a different kind. Not between body and spirit, but between past and present. Between what survives and what it teaches you about why survival matters. You think of the Greeks and their noisy democracy, of the Romans and their empire of stone, of Boudica and her fire, of the healers who learned to soothe what they couldn't explain. All of them, in their own way, were trying to make sense of being alive. Sappho, more than anyone, succeeded, not by explaining but by feeling. The sky brightens. A fisherman rows past, his oar cutting a clean line through the water. He hums something, a tune without words, and it sounds familiar. Perhaps it's one of hers, or perhaps it's just the ocean repeating its favourite melody. The world turns, unchanged and completely new. The day stretches open, the sea gleams, and you can almost hear her last whisper. You wouldn't last a day in our world, but somehow we lasted long enough to build yours. The line lingers in the air like the final note of a song that doesn't really end. The waves erase your footprints, but not your presence. The wind carries the echo of every voice that has ever tried to make sense of love, of suffering, of balance, of meaning. And with that, you exhale. Quietly, slowly, like the sea itself. The story rests now, but history keeps breathing.